They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I paved mine with amoxicillin, ciprofloxacin, and a naive belief that I could fix the past. Standing there, bound to a wooden stake in the center of a muddy square in Marseille, listening to the crackle of dry timber being piled beneath my feet, I finally understood the terrifying weight of time. I wasn't being executed because I had failed. I was being burned alive because I had succeeded too well. I looked out at the crowd faces I had saved. Lungs I had cleared. Fevers I had broken with pills, manufactured 700 years in their future. They didn't look at me with gratitude anymore. They looked at me with a primal, superstitious terror. To them, I wasn't a doctor. I was a necromancer who had stolen souls back from the grave, disrupting the divine order of judgment. But the real horror wasn't the fire waiting to consume my flesh. It was the realization that hit me just moments before the torch was lit. By saving these hundreds of people, by introducing modern chemical warfare against ancient biology, I hadn't just saved a city. I had potentially doomed the entire timeline of human history. I took antibiotics to 1347 to stop the Black Death, but I ended up creating something far, far worse. The mission was theoretically simple. History books tell us that the Black Death wiped out anywhere from 30 to 60% of Europe's population between 1347 and 1351. It was a demographic cataclysm that reshaped civilization. But from the perspective of 2024, it was also a biological tragedy that was easily preventable. We had the cure. We had the knowledge. I volunteered not for the glory, but for the humanity of it. I packed a reinforced, sterile medical case with thousands of doses of broad-spectrum antibiotics for fluids and modern sanitation equipment. My arrival point was the port of Marseille, November 1347, exactly when the Genoese galleys docked, bringing the rats and the fleas that carried Yersinia pestis. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight of the past, it's the smell. No history book, no simulation. No museum can prepare you for the olfactory assault of a medieval port city in the grip of a plague. It was a thick, cloying cocktail of rotting seaweed, raw sewage, wood smoke, and the sweet, copper scent of unwashed bodies and death. I stepped out of the temporal displacement field in a secluded alley, adjusting my N95 respirator. To the locals, I must have looked like a demon or an angel figure, clad in strange, synthetic fabrics, face hidden behind a white muzzle. I didn't wait for introductions. I went straight to the dying. My first patient was a dock worker, a boy no older than 16, writhing on a pallet of dirty straw. His groin and armpits were swollen with black excised bubosta, hallmark of the disease. His family was praying over him, waiting for the end. I pushed past them, ignoring their cries of alarm, and administered a high dose of antibiotics and fluids. In 1347, there was no resistance to these drugs. The bacteria had never seen a synthetic antimicrobial agent. The effect was practically biblical. Within 24 hours, the fever broke. Within 48, the buboes began to recede. The boy sat up and asked for water. The silence in that room was heavier than the screaming had been. They looked at the boy, then at me, and then they fell to their knees. That was my first mistake. I let them believe it was a miracle. Word spread faster than the infection. Within a week I had a makeshift clinic running in the ruins of a warehouse. I was treating hundreds. The white pills, as they called them, became more valuable than gold. I was saving mothers, fathers, priests, and criminals. I felt invincible. I was rewriting the darkest chapter of the Middle Ages with a prescription pad. I didn't sleep. I ran on adrenaline and the intoxicating feeling of playing God. But I wasn't paying attention to the shadows. In 2024, a doctor is a scientist. In 1347, a healer who bypasses the will of God is a threat. The local clergy began to whisper. Why did I not pray? Why did I use strange, alchemical waters to wash my hands? Why did the angel of death pass over the houses I visited? The conflict came to a head at the town's central fountain. I was attempting to chlorinate the water supply, trying to break the transmission vector. A group of city guards, led by a hooded inquisitor named Gui, surrounded me. They didn't see public health measures. They saw a sorcerer poisoning the well with acrid-smelling potions. I tried to explain. I shouted about germs, about invisible creatures that lived in the water and the fleas. I tried to draw diagrams of bacteria in the dirt. It was futile. To them, the plague was a miasma, a punishment for sin, or a planetary alignment. The idea of microscopic organisms was as ludicrous to them as magic is to us. I was pistol-whipped, or rather, clubbed and dragged into the damp darkness of the church dungeons. For 3 days, I sat in filth, my medical bag confiscated, listening to the screams of the city outside. The irony was bitter. I had the power to save them all, yet they locked me away to die with them. But then, the coughing started on the other side of the iron door. Inquisitor G, the man who had condemned me as a heretic, collapsed in the corridor. The guards were terrified to touch him. Through the bars, I saw the dark swelling on his neck. The terror in his eyes wasn't the fear of God anymore. It was the biological fear of an organism. Realizing its end, he ordered the guards to bring me the bag. He was a hypocrite. Like so many powerful men throughout history, he wanted the witchcraft if it meant saving his own skin. I stood over him, holding the last bottle of Cipro. This was the pivotal moment. I could let him die. History would probably thank me, but the Hippocratic Oath is a stubborn thing. It doesn't recognize time periods or moral character. I gave him the pills. I treated him, and as he recovered, watching the Black Death retreat from his veins, I checked my supplies. I was nearly empty. And that's when the data on my wrist comp updated, running a simulation based on the biological samples I had analyzed. The blood drained from my face, leaving me colder than the dungeon stone. The simulation showed a catastrophe. By introducing heavy antibiotics into a virgin population and then running out, I hadn't eradicated the plague. I was creating a bottleneck event. I was killing off the weak bacteria, leaving behind only the strongest, most mutated strains. The few survivors I couldn't treat would carry a version of Yersinia pestis that was resistant to modern medicine. If this new super Black Death escaped Marseille, it wouldn't kill half of Europe. It would kill everyone. There would be no Renaissance, no Enlightenment, no Industrial Revolution, just a silent, empty continent. Furthermore, I realized something even more devastating about the structure of history. The Black Death, in its original timeline, killed so many peasants that labor became scarce. This scarcity gave the survivors leverage. It forced the nobility to pay wages, effectively ending serfdom and feudalism. It broke the chains of the Middle Ages. By saving these people, by trying to keep the population high, I was inadvertently solidifying the feudal system. I was dooming their children to eternal slavery and poverty. The tragedy was necessary. The death was the fuel for the engine of progress. I sat there, the savior of Marseille, weeping for the necessity of death. The Inquisitor, now recovered, didn't thank me. He saw my despair as a confession of guilt. He ordered the pyre to be built. He claimed I had bargained with demons to spare him, and the debt had to be paid with fire. As they dragged me to the square, the smell of smoke was different this time. It wasn't just wood. It was the scent of a timeline correcting itself. I had one card left to play. My return device was concealed in the heel of my boot, activated by a specific sequence of pressure. As the executioner approached with the torch, I looked at the crowd one last time. I saw the mask I had worn my spare in '95, and protective goggles sitting on a table of evidence nearby. It looked distinct, with its protruding filter and bug-like eyes. It looked like a beak. I realized with a jolt that I wasn't just a visitor. I was the inspiration. The plague doctors of the future, with their terrifying beak masks filled with herbs they were trying to copy *me*. They would mimic the form without understanding the function. A cargo cult of sanitation. Forgive me, I whispered. Not to God, but to the future I had almost destroyed. I slammed my heel down. The temporal drive wind, a sound so high-pitched, it shattered the silence. The air around me warped, bending light and sound. The fire from the torch was just inches from the straw when the world dissolved into a streak of blue light. I left them there. I left them to the plague. I returned to 2024, to a sterile lab, gasping for air that smelled of ozone and antiseptic. I checked the history books immediately. The Black Death had happened. The population had collapsed. Feudalism had fallen. The world was as it should be. But in the archives of Marseille, There is a local legend, a story of a stranger who came from the sea with white magic, who healed the sick with a touch, and who vanished in a pillar of heavenly light before the fires could touch him. They say he left behind a mosque, a warning that some evils must be endured so that good may eventually rise from the ashes. I sit here now, holding a bottle of antibiotics, knowing that sometimes the hardest part of being a doctor isn't fighting death. It's knowing when to let it win. History is a fragile web, and we are often just clumsy spiders walking across it. If this story made you question the nature of progress and destiny, please subscribe to the channel. We dive deep into the paradoxes of time and the human condition every week. Hit the like button if you believe some mysteries are better left unsolved, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a journey through time. And tell me in the comments, if you had the cure for the Black Death, would you have used it, knowing the cost? I'll be reading your answers.